On today's episode, we talk with Jim "the Goat" Campbell about the new Tough Mudder obstacles for 2018 and break down the 25 vault obstacles for your vote. This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's the world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome back to Season 2 of World's Toughest Podcast. I know we've already had one episode this year. Maybe you heard about it, but we didn't have much time to talk. I am so excited to be back. How are you? Damian Shimo, Chris Gorman, Candace Henson. I missed you guys. This is going to be our best year yet. Best out of 2. Before we start, my name is Will Hicks. You can find me on Twitter at @TheWillHicks and on Instagram at WillHicks, or you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. If you'd like to be a part of the show, leave us a review on iTunes through the Purple Podcast app, and I will read it on a future episode. If you've left a review and I have not read it yet, stay tuned this week. We are going to get caught up on all those reviews from the end of last year. You can also subscribe to the World's Toughest newsletter by texting the word tough to 22828. That's the word tough to the number 22828. I got an email from Matt Walker in the UK, and I need to apologize to my non-US listeners. I didn't even think about the international texting situation. Here's what Matt said. Hi, Will. Big admirer of your podcast, and I've listened to pretty much every episode. Just wanted to let you know that us Brits can't text the number to be added to the email list. Is there an alternative? I hope to see you at Europe's Toughest Mudder Midlands and my first Worlds this year. Cheers, Matt Walker. P.S. 5 stars. Thank you for that, Matt Walker. If you're outside the U.S. and aren't able to text the word tough to the number 22828, or if you're inside the U.S. and just don't want to text me, you can subscribe by email World's Toughest Podcast at gmail.com with subscribe in the subject line. And in the body of the email, put your name, your email address, and your cell phone number, and I will make sure you're on the list. Matt Walker, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Welcome to Kickoff Week. We've got brand new episodes every day this week, kicking off the new season of the podcast, and looking forward to the new Tough Mudder season starting on March 3rd in Los Angeles. New episode on Monday, new episode on Tuesday, new episode on Wednesday. Guess what we've got on Thursday? New episode on Thursday. And on Friday, just for you, a brand new episode, World's Toughest Podcast. That's 5 weeks worth of quality programming crammed into 5 days. Have you set your race schedule for the year yet? Tell me about it at willhicks@gmail.com. How many Tough Mudders are you going to do this year? Maybe this is the year you multi-lap for the first time. Maybe this is the first year you're buying a season pass and doing Saturdays and Sundays. Or maybe you saw everyone having fun without you last year, and you're going to get your holy grail this year by running a toughest, and world's toughest mudder. The first couple years I ran Tough Mudder, I only did 2 each year. I live in Southern California, and Tough Mudder has a Los Angeles event and a SoCal event. So I went to both of those. One time, I was in line behind somebody on a Saturday before registration opens. Everyone lines up at the registration tables waiting for them to open. And I started talking to somebody wearing a World's Toughest Mudder bib. And they said they were running 2 laps that day, another lap on Sunday, And then they were going to Arizona next weekend to do the same thing over again. It literally blew my mind. I thought, I'm kind of a big deal doing it twice in a year. This guy and this girl I was talking to, they were both doing it, 3 times in one weekend and then 3 times the next weekend. That was the weekend I signed up for my first World's Toughest Mudder. I ran it with my sister, Maggie, 2015. I'm getting off track, but you want to hear another story? Here's a story. So 2015, ran World's Toughest Mudder, had a blast. At the brunch the next day, where I almost had breakfast with Sarah Knight, who won second place that year for the women. No big deal. They have a raffle. And at that raffle, I won a season pass. This was in 2015. This podcast was not even an idea yet. Hadn't even thought about it yet. I got the season pass. Once I got the season pass, I got it for free. You kind of have to do more races, right? Otherwise, you're losing money. So I did both days in Los Angeles. I did both days at SoCal. I did Arizona. I did a bunch that year. And then World's Toughest Mudder again. And this time, I brought a bunch of my old friends with me. And then again, the same in 2017. I bought a season pass in 2017. And I went all over it doing races last year. Chicago, Atlanta, Whistler. I haven't thought about this before, but if I hadn't won I wasn't going to buy a season pass. For 2 races a year, why would you do that? But if I hadn't won that season pass, I probably would have just kept doing a couple a year. And 2015 might have been my only World's Toughest Mudder. This podcast would not have happened. Or at least I wouldn't be the host of it. And it all goes back to dumb luck. Winning a raffle at a breakfast. Crazy. Anyway, if you've never run World's Toughest Mudder, this is a good year to make it your first. Let me tell you why this should be your first year to run World's Toughest Mudder. 3 reasons. 1, it's early in the year. You've got plenty of time to train for it. We're in January as I'm recording this. You got 10 months still to train. Plenty of time. 2, you got a backlog of 60-something episodes of World's Toughest Podcast. There is tons of knowledge. I've had awesome guests on the show. Almost anything you need to know about World's Toughest Mudder, you can probably find listening to the episodes that we have so far. It'll prepare you for the race and hopefully prepare you to do well at World's Toughest. And 3, this might be the biggest reason you should run this year specifically, 2018. I think it's going to be a pendulum swinging year. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Like I just talked about, my first year at Worlds was 2015. If you ask somebody who'd run before, 2013, 2014, about 2015, they would tell you about the water. So much water on the course, in and out of the water, all day long, all night long. There's always going to be some water at World's Toughest Mudder. But every time you get in, you have to sludge through it or swim through it. You have to get out and start running all over again. And it slows you down. Anytime there's water on the course, it's going to slow you down. And it's going to make you cold. And 2015 had a ton of water. 2016 swung the other way. A lot less water, and they modified the obstacles to make them easier overnight. They nailed a ledge to the bottom of Liberator to make it easier. Liberator is the pegboard obstacle. They nailed the board to the bottom of it to make it easier to climb over it. They extended platforms on Funky Monkey so you could basically skip the first half of the obstacle, Funky Monkey. They hung rope ladders down Stage 5 Klinger so you could climb up the front of that a lot easier. They had more people in 2016. They had more people hit 50 and 75 miles and 100 miles. 7 people hit 100 miles that year than ever before for those 3 big milestones. 2017, the difficulty swung back the other way, super hard again. Eli said it during the pre-race briefing at the start line. He said something like, we're glad so many people hit their goals last year. We don't want that to happen this year. Now, that's not a direct quote, but that's basically what he said. And 2017 was hard. One of the penalties wasn't hard enough. So mid-race, they made the penalty like a quarter mile longer. And I don't know if they've ever done that before, where they changed it up in the middle like that, making something harder than it was before. So 2018 in Atlanta. Hot Atlanta, as everyone says. First, it's going to be cold Atlanta. Cold Atlanta. Don't show up without a wetsuit. Seriously, it will be cold. There's going to be people, I know that I can tell you right now, in January, I'm telling you, in November, people will show up without a wetsuit. You must bring, it's going to be cold in Atlanta. Bring a wetsuit. I don't care what anyone says. If anyone says you don't need a wetsuit, they're either lying to you or they think it's funny. You need to bring a wetsuit. But other than that, I also expect Team HQ to pull it back a notch. It's never going to be easy. You're never going to find an easy World's Toughest Mudder. But if you're thinking, I just want to run it once and hit 50 miles and check it off my bucket list, then I think 2018 could be your year. Everything I just said about 2018 in cold Atlanta is just speculation. There could be someone from Team HQ listening right now, and they hear this episode, and they say, oh ho ho, so that's what they think. And then they turn the difficulty up even higher. And if that's the case, sorry guys. So this is the second episode of Season 2. We're going to talk with Jim Campbell about his Tough Mudder story, kind of what happened to him and why he got into Tough Mudder in the first place. And then we're going to break down the 29 new obstacles up for discussion this year. That's a lie. Of those 29, 25 of them are old, but we'll get into that. This was going to be the first episode of the year, but that honor went to Evan Preparis and Ryan Woods a couple weeks ago. We're going to talk more about that episode later this week, but if that was the only episode of the show you've ever heard, and then you tune into this episode expecting more of the same, you're going to be disappointed. Or maybe happily surprised. Before we talk with Jim Campbell, let's read some iTunes reviews. The first review comes from Lad Goose. Best podcast ever. 5 stars. I love this podcast so much that I'm leaving a second review. It is hands down the best podcast for OCR in general and Tough Mudder in particular. The info and advice really helped me prepare for my first World's Toughest Mudder. By the way, the Christopher Mendoza jingle is now burned into my brain. Smiley face. Thank you, Lad Goose. I didn't know it was even possible to leave a second review, but I appreciate the kind words. I think Chris Mendoza and Keith Allen may be going back at each other with some new rap battles soon. I know Keith launched an offensive. I don't think Chris has responded yet, but hopefully we get some more catchphrases in the process. Whoever loses, we win. Next review is from Mud Dude. Mud Dude writes, listening equals success. 5 stars. I had no idea how much this podcast would save my life in my first WTM in 2017. Having only one Tough Mudder under my belt, I really had no idea what was required or needed until I started listening to Will's podcasts. Because of these, I conquered WTM without a hitch and hit 50 miles. I took notes from each show and felt prepared for any eventuality, even down to the shoelace that secured my headlamp to my wetsuit, just in case. It was an amazing spiritual and physical experience and went beyond what I thought I was capable of. So you can imagine, I highly recommend the show. 75 miles in 2018, here I come. Congratulations, Mud Dude. 50 miles is a big deal, especially in your first year. 75 miles in year number 2 would be huge. Good luck. And good on you for taking notes. I heard once that the weakest ink is stronger than the strongest memory. I put notes in my phone all the time, or text myself things I don't want to forget. If you want to remember something, you need to write it down. A writer is a thinker, someone else told me. Well done, Mud Dude. Last review comes from Richard Mark Mann. Richard Mark Mann says, all the good stuff. 5 stars. This podcast is so chock full of great info and is tied directly into the heart of the community, all while not being elitist, derogatory, or exclusionary. Will has managed to grow this podcast in such a short time to become the place to go for access to not just top pros, but also less elite athletes who can provide tips based on their experience that are relatable to anyone looking to do worlds or to pursue OCR in general. That being said, I love the elite interviews and I'm blown away by the caliber of athlete that Will gets on the show. I look forward to every episode, and it helps to keep me motivated for my OCR season. Keep up the great work, and I hope to see you at the races. Richard Mark Mann. Thank you, Richard Mark Mann. I really appreciate those kind words. Seriously, I'm going to pull quotes out of that review for the back of my book cover. You are too kind. If you'd like to be a part of the show, like Richard Mark Mann, Mud Dude, and Lad Goose, you can leave a review on iTunes also. Open the Purple Podcast app and search for Tough Mudder. Click our logo and scroll down to Write a Review, and I will read it on a future episode. Last thing before we talk with Jim Campbell. The deadline to vote on the vault obstacles is January 25th at 11:59 p.m. January 25th, 11:59 p.m. There's a link in the show notes. There's also a link on our Facebook page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. So if there's an obstacle you want to see in 2018, you need to go vote. It's time to talk with Jim Campbell. Let's go to the phones. Jim the Goat Campbell is one of the most well-known members of the World's Toughest Mudder community. The CEO of Tough Mudder, Will Dean, wrote a chapter about Jim in his book, It Takes a Tribe. And Jim has been interviewed about Tough Mudder in national media, such as CBS's Toughest Mudder series, NBC's Today Show, and Will Hicks' World's Toughest Podcast. Jim is the first man to complete 100 Tough Mudder events and is one of a handful of people to participate in every World's Toughest Mudder since 2011. I'm pleased to welcome Jim Campbell to the show. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Will. How's it going?
So good. How are you?
Good. Just working a late night tonight. Glad to catch up with you.
Jim, how many events are you up to now?
I'm at 140 events as of World's Toughest Mudder last year.
140. And you had a couple guys join you this year in the 100 Club.
I did. I had Joe Perry and Joe Anderson both hit 100 right at the end, and they're continuing on too. So it's going to be a trek to 150 for all of us.
Jim, you've been on our show a few times, but we've never really gotten into your backstory. What happened in your life that led you to Tough Mudder?
Well, the thing that actually brought me directly to Tough Mudder was an accident that I had in 2009. I'd done a bunch of things athletically through the years as starting back even in the 70s. Like I rode bicycle motocross, I windsurfed and was in the Olympic trials in '84. I'd raced, motorcycles nationally with the AMA. I'd done some stuff with when I obtained my pilot's license, and right before my accident that brought me to Tough Mudder, I had actually ridden my Harley Davidson 1,000 miles a day for 31 days to set a then world record that's now been broke by a girl who took 6 months and beat it by like 10,000 miles. So that kind of fell by the wayside. But right after I was riding that ride that was for muscular dystrophy, where I raised like $40,000 for them, I was driving down to Texas, and just a normal day, like after driving 100 plus miles an hour, like 18 to 20 hours a day, like it just seemed surreal to drive around at 50 miles an hour. So I was just driving through a place called Weatherford, Texas, and as I was cruising down the highway, traffic was kind of converging to the left in a construction zone, and I was watching traffic. And like I said, I was driving 50 miles an hour, the speed limit. It was a beautiful warm day, and a truck veered over right in front of me and tapped my motorcycle and knocked me off the side of the road into the borrow ditch. And I was down there driving, it's still at 50 miles an hour, driving through the dirt and stuff. And I'd ridden a motorcycle for a long time, so that wasn't a big deal. But when the truck continued on down in front of me, that it veered off, it hit another truck, and it sent that truck right into the medium in front of me. and it stopped broadside, and I had no way to get out of there. You know, it was pushed right in front of me, slammed my brakes on, knew it wasn't going to help. I had tried to evasively avoid it by turning, and my bike started to slide, so I just decided just to try to hit the thing to slow down. I hit the guy right in the side of the truck and tore off his mirror, and I remember him veering back and looking at me. I could see his eyes because it had closed. And right when my motorcycle drove into the side of his truck, that's when the left femur went through my hip and went through the back and then ripped my pelvis right below me right in half. And as I veered off the truck, I still maintained my bike and was still up. I saw the guardrail with like the sharp parts of the metal on the back side of it, and I thought, right then I instantly thought, like, I'm going to die, and this is not looking well for me. And right then, like, everything stopped. Like if you've ever seen that movie, like one of them where they do the surround, like a 360 surround where they shoot bullets or they're in a fight or whatever, I swear to God, like, everything stopped at that moment. The sun was warm, beating down on me. It felt like someone had wrapped me in a super warm blanket, and out of nowhere, someone or something said, "You're going to get hurt, but you're going to be okay." And the second that voice stopped, I went full speed into the guardrail, flipped my bike over, landed head first, drove my head into the ground, and then my motorcycle landed on top of me, breaking my C1 and C2. I'm sitting there, and my motorcycle is on fire, and I can hear these people talking, and they're like, "Oh, the guy's dead," you know, and they're just casually talking. And I thought, what could I do? Because I knew they were talking about me. What could I do to show them I was alive? So I reached out with my hand that was crushed in the ground, and I started flipping dirt. And then someone said, "Oh, the guy's alive," you know. So they flipped the motorcycle off, turned it off, and rolled me over. And then I realized that my pelvis hip and everything was broken. So immediately I forced myself up on my two hands to take the weight off my hip because it hurt a little bit less, but it was just throbbing really bad. Right then, that very moment, before anyone showed up, like somebody pulled up in a green, like, sedan kind of car, and a lady ran over, and she said she was a medic, and she said, "Hey, don't move, you've broken your neck, you broke your neck," and she had a little neck brace in her hand. And I'm thinking, that's weird, but I'm like, well, my neck's not broke, so I shook my head, like, vigorously, right? And later I found out from the neurosurgeon, like, he said, "Yeah, you probably should have discovered your spinal cord and just fell dead right there." And then who pulls up next? An ambulance pulls up out in the middle of nowhere. Like, I'm 50 minutes from Dallas-Fort Worth on a highway, Highway 20. And so an ambulance pulls up. Well, the ambulance pulls up, the guys run like, "What happened?" There's like, "Oh, this guy's been in an accident." Let's load him up. So they're loading me up, and finally, like, right when they're on the fringe and loading me in the ambulance, the state patrol pulls up, and he runs up because he's thinking, "God, there's an accident here. They're already loading the guy. Like, what's going on?" He walks up to the guys, and the ambulance guys put their hand out, and he goes, "Hey, I need to get that guy's ID and what's going on here." And the guy puts his hand out, the ambulance driver, and goes, "Yeah, he's not going to make it to the hospital."
When he said that he's not going to make it to the hospital, did you say, "Hey, I'm alive, like, I'm not dead yet," kind of thing?
Well, no, I told him, "I'm right here." Like I said to the guy, like, he's at the foot of the thing, the stretcher they're loading in, and he tells me, "Yeah, he's not going to make it." Like I'm unconscious or something. I'm not unconscious. I never lost consciousness the whole time. So we jump in the ambulance, or they don't jump, they push me in. And so they start talking to the doctor, and they start giving me, morphine. And they give me a couple shots of morphine, and it's making me feel okay. It's not really taking the pain, but it's taking that intense pain, off of all of it. And after, I think they gave me 3 or 4 of them, and I said, I know from watching TV shows, like, you can give me enough morphine that I'll stop breathing and die. And he looks at me, and I said, you haven't given me that much yet, have you? And so he runs back, and he talks to the doctor on the phone and stuff, and the other guy's driving. And he comes back again, and I'm like, "Hey, so what did you find out?" And the guy goes, "Do you want more morphine?" And I said, "No, that's not what I asked you. I said, you can give me enough morphine to die." And he looks at me again, and he goes, "Do you want more morphine?" And I'm like, "No, I'm done with morphine. Like, we're all done. I'm making it to the hospital if nothing else." And again, at this time, like my stomach's swelling up. I'm getting the feeling like things aren't going the right way because I keep asking him what's wrong with me, and he won't do anything but just give me morphine. Like that's all he's going to do. And I know he couldn't fix my bleeding or anything else, but I keep asking him, like, even what's wrong with me. He won't talk to me. He won't make eye contact. If he's not giving me morphine, he's like up in front talking to the other guy. So we roll into the emergency room. They wheel me into the ICU, into a super dark room, or what I thought was a super dark room. I wasn't there very long. They moved me over to the bed, and again, I'm all rolled up in a ton of pain, trying to kind of do it. I have a neck brace on. I realized then, like, I've got a cut across my head and some other stuff. And it was funny because I don't know if it was right then or right before, because realize I'm there by myself. No one's there. I've texted my kids that I was in an accident, but nobody's responded. So they've taken me all the way to this ICU room. No one's there. No one knows I'm there. So I tell the guy, will you take a picture? Because I want to remember this. He's like, are you serious? And I said, yeah, but this is like the last picture of me. Like, I want this picture. And I said, just take it on my phone. And he's like, okay. So he snapped a couple pictures of me, and I have it. I still have it in my thing that I pull out sometimes because I wanted to remember, like, it was that, tragic to me that it was shocking what was going on. So finally, or if I say finally, like 5 minutes later, a doctor comes in, and he's the internist, and he's like, yeah, Mr. Campbell, you're in bad shape, and we've got some internal bleeding, and I think you've got a broken neck. And I'm like, okay. And so then the orthopedic person comes in because they're going to look at my hip, because my hip is in shambles. It's like hanging there, and I can tell it's all jacked up, besides the cutting in my crotch. And they walk in and start to talk to the doctor, and he goes, I'll let you know if we need you. And right then I realized, like, now the doctor is telling the other doctor that I may not make it, that they don't want to waste their time on fixing my hip. And I start crying because I'm realizing there's no one here. No one's going to come save me right now. Like, it's me against all these doctors and the ambulance guy and everything else. Like, I better buck up and figure out what's going on. And I think when people ask me about, sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. When people ask me where my goat tough thing started, I can tell you it started right there, because I know in the interim, from the time that I left from the accident site to the time I actually got to the hospital, I know there was a life-changing thing that occurred there. And at that point, and all of us have it at some point in our life, where you just decide, I'm going to live or I'm going to die. And I think it's up to us as much as it's up to doctors and everybody else. And I looked the doctor in the eye and I said, I know you don't know who I am, and I'm all alone here today. I said, but I'm not going to die, so don't give up on me. And he said, well, you're very injured. He said, we've got bleeding inside you, and we don't know where it's from. He said, we need to open you up, and we need to figure out where it is. And they hadn't even gotten to the far where I'd been to the x-ray, and they confirmed that my neck was broke or anything else. I mean, this is like 5 minutes after getting there. And I've never felt so freaking alone in my entire life when all this stuff's going on. So he finally said, after I pleaded with him, and I said, listen, don't give up on me. Don't give up on me. And he said, we're not going to give up, but it's not looking good, So hang in there. And I'm like, okay. So like 5 minutes later, so I'm sitting there, and they do give me some more pain meds and stuff, which I think is more morphine and stuff. These other two guys come in, and I think they seem like they were 20-some years old, because they're talking, and I hear them conversing back and forth. And I'm like, hey, guys, how's it going? And they're like, oh, you're awake. And I'm like, yeah. And then I hear, like, this noise that I've heard my whole life, like it's an electric drill, like, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what they're going to do. Like, I wonder why they brought a cordless drill in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so pretty soon, on my left front temple, I feel them drill a screw into my skull for my halo that they're putting on. No one told me they were putting a halo. No one said they were doing anything, right? So instantly, my left hand breaks free, and I punched a guy and he's like, hey, this guy's hands aren't tied up. And I'm like, of course they're not tied up. What are you guys doing? And he's like, oh, we have to put a halo on you. I'm like, well, can somebody tell you when you do that? I said, are you going to deaden them up? He goes, no, we just pretty much screw them right into your skull. So they tied both of my hands down, and he told me, yeah, it's probably better if you lay still while we do this. And I'm like, okay. So I sat there as they drove 4, stainless steel pins into in and around my head. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit because there's a lot of story here. It progresses forward. It progresses to the point where they stopped the bleeding internally. They figured out what it was. It kind of, in part, it served itself, but it also, there was some broken stuff, an acetabulum that had cracked in some places, and they wanted to do surgery and put pins on it and get it all lined back up. And I asked him if there was something else, and I'm not opposed to like medical help or anything else. That's what it's not about. But I said, can you do something else besides surgery? Because he said it's going to feel just like you broke your hip and everything again after we do surgery. And I'm like, I'd rather not feel that. So what can we do? So what they did is they wrapped me in this little cocoon super tight for like 7 days. And I stayed in it. And after 7 days, they took an X-ray again, and the plates and all the cracks and everything had like come back together from being immobile. You know, I guess they got it close enough where they didn't have to. My pelvis, where it was broke, it was still like a 1/4 inch down, but they said, you know, that's all meat in there and that'll heal. So it kind of progressively got better. You know, they were more worried about my neck still because of the C1 and C2 break and everything else on it. And I'd had a stroke and some other stuff, so they were concerned about other things. You know, my hip was, believe it or not, was the least of my problems. So as it progressed, I got a little better, and in 3 months, I was able to be released out of there after going through rehab and everything. And I got back home, and I'm sitting there, living in my house by myself. I got there initially in a wheelchair and then progressed to a walker where I was kind of partial weight bearing on my hip. And I still had my halo on and everything, just trying to live in my house. My mom would come over every day and clean the pin sites in the halo in the morning and night so they didn't get crusty or infected or anything. And so I kept telling the doctor, and here's what I would tell people about waiting for the injuries, because this is the biggest thing that I should have done different from what I did. Because they said initially that I was going to die, and then I wasn't going to walk, and then I was never going to run. And it was part of the reason I got involved in Tough Mudder. And, you know, they just kept telling me, no, no, no. Well, I'll tell you, you know, someday someone will tell you that you can't do something, and later you will thank them, because that was the drive and determination it took to do Tough Mudder. But I did it much too early. I should have let it heal longer so that my recovery was a shorter time and that it became stronger before I started using it. Because in the end now, after seeing what I've had to go through to get stem cells and everything else to help fix my hip and regenerate it, if I would have let that grow back a little more solid without getting on it, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this in a minute, I think it would have healed better, and it could have been lasted even longer than it did. But this is one of the reasons it didn't. So I'm in a walker and I'm in a halo and I'm like trying to be normal, walking around malls and everything else. Everybody's looking at me like I'm freaking Frankenstein, right? So that's a little hard to deal with. So the day the doctor releases me and says, okay, you can start, and this is like, I think 4 to 6 weeks after I left the hospital, he's like, you can start doing weight bearing on your left hip, you know, and start putting it. So what does Jim do in his halo with his walker? Jim goes to the incline, and Jim does the incline with his walker and his halo. I get halfway up, and I run into a neurosurgeon on the incline. And the guy is like, what are you doing? And I said, man, I just got released today, and I've been like a cat on a hot tin roof. I just want to get some exercise. He said, you know, there's a lot of stuff you can do in that halo and that walker that doesn't involve an incline on a snowy day with ice on it.
The incline is kind of a well-known hiking trail or hill. Not a hill. That's not doing it justice, but they're in Colorado.
Right. It goes up to like 78 degrees. It's where they pulled some tracks off an old incline train that used to climb to the top where you can overlook the city. And I had done it for training before I'd ever done Tough Mudder or World's Toughest Mudder. That was kind of the thing I trained on to train for Tough Mudders. So, of course, it's the first thing I want to do, but in retrospect, it probably wasn't a good idea. But when you're halfway up it and you're thinking, it's probably not a good idea, and then some neurosurgeon, like he's like, I do this every day. He said, you're the stupidest person I've ever seen up here. He said, there is nothing tough. There's nothing or extraordinary about you. And I'm like, whoa. And then he just walked off. And I'm like, well, he was probably right, but I'm halfway up the incline. So I'm like, I'm going to the top, right? So I go to the top and actually fall a couple of times because I can't keep my balance because it's kind of icy. And so coming down, I can normally do the incline up and down in about an hour or a little under an hour. It took me 3.5 hours to do it that day. And when I got down, this was the stupid thing about my whole story. So I get down and I think, I worked up a pretty good sweat. Like, I can't believe it. I get down to the flat part. I finally make it to my car. I'm like, yeah, that was stupid. I'm not going to do that again. I get to my car and I still think, God, my back's really sweating, everything else. Some guy comes up behind me and is like, Mister, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I just did the incline. And he's like, oh my God. And I'm like, what? He goes, your back and your shirt is just all full of blood. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, your back pin back there, your head is just full of blood. Well, going up and down the incline, this thing holds your neck and head straight. Well, I had fought so much against it, like losing my balance and maybe falling down once, that I had dislodged one of the pins in the back of my halo. And I'm like, oh, this can't be good. So I immediately called the doctor down in Dallas, which is the guy that worked on me. And he's like, go up to the trauma center in Craig, Colorado, and have them adjust it, have them put it back in. It has to be at this certain tensile strength and do this. And, the tension has to be perfect. And I'm like, okay. So I go to the emergency room right there. And I wait like 2 hours in the emergency room. No one will touch me. No one will do anything. They're like, we don't have any expertise in cerebral halos. Like, we need a neurosurgeon. We don't have one on stock. So after waiting there, no joke, like 4 hours of just bleeding out of the back of my head, my shirt, it looks like I was in a dog fight or something. I'm totally bloody. My shorts are bloody. I mean, they probably don't even want me in their waiting room anymore. I just get up and leave. I'm like, you guys aren't doing anything? Like, I'm gone. So I go, and I'm driving, and I'm thinking, God, I got to tighten this thing up because now my halo's hurting. It's like rubbing my head. So I stop at an auto parts store, and I'm like, I got to get a hex head wrench and a 7/16 little open end wrench, and I can fix it. I walk in, I look like I've been in a car accident again, right? The people at O'Reilly's look at me and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, hey guys, can you help me find a couple tools? And they're like, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just bleeding a little bit from back here. And so they take me into the Allen wrench section, and I'm like, can you check? I think that's like a 10. And he's like, dude, you got blood all over you. And I'm like, yeah, I need to tighten this up if you don't mind. And so we finally get the tool too. It's like $8. They don't even charge me. They're like, no, just take them. And I'm like, I have a favor to ask of one of you guys. And they're like, what? Just whatever you need. Just, get out of here. And I'm like, I'm going to tighten this pin up in my head, but I'm not going to be able to set the other screw because I know I'm going to be in pain. I said, because it hurt really bad when they put it on. I said, would one of you guys tighten that 7/16 nut? And they're like, no way, we cannot do that. And one of the guys finally agreed, and the manager made him go outside with me to do it. He's like, you are not doing that in the store. You are not tightening that nut. You can do it on your own time. Take lunch. Just get the hell out of the store. So we went out to the front, and I leaned across my car, and I said, okay, I'm going to spin this Allen wrench, and I'm going to tighten this thing into my skull. And I said, as soon as it's tight, I want you to just quickly tighten that 7/16 nut. And he's like, okay, man, I'll do it. And so I spun it in, and oh my God, I spun it in like one turn to my skull, and then I did it another half turn to make sure it was super tight. And I'm like, now, and he tightened it up, and I sat there, and I could just feel it like it had happened again. And I started crying a little bit because it hurt. I mean, it really hurt on the back of my skull. And like 5 minutes later, it just felt everything was okay. The blood quit popping out on the back, and I couldn't change my shirt or anything because it went all the way over my halo and everything, so I had to wait till I got home. But I got home that night, and my mom came over to clean my pins, and she's like, I am never coming over here again if you do that again. And I'm like, no, I learned my lesson after 10 hours between the incline and between the parts store and between everything else in the emergency room. Like, I won't do it again. So that's my story for letting yourself heal before you're ready to get back on the thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How did you sign up for your first Tough Mudder after that?
Well, let's see. So I got my halo off a couple of months later, and then that's when I was surfing the internet, and I saw this thing like the toughest event on the planet. I think a lot of us saw it on Facebook. And when I saw that, I'm like, this is like the cherry on the cake after all this stuff I've been through, like completing the toughest event on the planet, right? Like it shows some guy jumping through fire, and I'm like, that's cool, and everything else. All the stuff they had in like 10 and 11 where they were promoting all this. It really was a badass event. It really was a lot tougher in the beginning than it is now, and probably because that they, just hadn't had it all figured out yet. They didn't know the limitations of everybody. So I think they did want to make it the toughest event on the planet. I think they did make it very difficult, but there was an element of fun with that too, But having it truly kicked on some of these obstacles was really a good challenge. So that was in 2011 of June. I did two that year. I did two days in Colorado, 1 and 2 days on Saturday and Sunday. I did, where was it? Austin was the other one I did right at the end. And then I think it was the Austin one. It was a super flat course that I had actually qualified for World's Toughest Mudder. You put your times in, and I didn't qualify in Colorado. It was like 2 hours and 30 minutes or something, and it wasn't good enough to qualify. And then when you put it on we just did it in a motorcycle track down in Austin, and it was a heck of a lot easier. So I made it in like 2 hours and 10 minutes or 15. It was enough to get in there. But in the end, they just let anybody who applied in 11, get in. So that's how I did that. And then when I did my first World's Toughest Mudder, the thing that probably allowed me to do as well as I did is I just pretty much planned on an all-out 24-hour expedition, like the worst thing that can happen to me. I never ran in a wetsuit or anything else before, but I'm thinking, I want to be prepared and I want to be ready. So I brought like 2 wetsuits and all this gear and all these jackets and everything else. And in the end, it's what saved me, because I started out in the wetsuit, got 2 laps in before it got dark, and then like my last lap through the night, it ended at like 3 o'clock in the morning, was the most miserable thing I'd ever done in my life. And I got to tell you, I always think like, oh, it's the hardest thing and the hardest thing. But I remember back to that night, I remember thinking maybe I should do one more lap. And I'm thinking there's no freaking way. Like I'm staying in this med tent. And I think I got done at the med tent at like 5, and then went and sat in my tent and everything until 10, and then everybody finished. But even all my clothes were froze on the tent. Like our tent, there wasn't 50 tents left at the end of the event. Like it was just crazy. Like it looked like a cyclone had blown through there, or a hurricane. Like it just ripped everyone was happy and jovial the day before, and just talking how great it was going to be and how the competition was going to be awesome. And then like at 5 o'clock that night, after a myriad of ambulances and withdrawals from hypothermia and everything else, there was less than 100 people that went into the night that year. So it was pretty awesome.
Let's talk about the 2018 obstacles. Tough Mudder released 4 new obstacles for this year, and 25 obstacles from the vault that people can vote on.
Right.
Let's talk about the new ones, and then we'll talk about the vault. The new obstacles are Kong Infinity, T-Boned, Happy Ending, and Third Rail. Now, these are like new to Tough Mudder Full, but some of these we've seen a few times over the last year. What did you think of Kong Infinity?
Meet Kong Infinity, the beast of all beasts, designed by mudders for mudders. This bad boy stands 18 feet tall and is a barrel of fun.
Man, I think that's the one they premiered at the World's Toughest Mudder, and I loved it.
Can you describe it? What does it look like?
It looks like a barrel
of fun
that have rings on it, and you have to progress uphill, kind of at not quite the same angle of Funky Monkey, but then it's on rails, so the sides of the barrel
of fun.
It's like what it is it's a wire wheel for electrical wire, and you roll up the sides of this channel, and you kind of progress. It's like Funky Monkey, but it's rings, and as you work your way through the rings, it crawls up one side of it, and then it finishes the second half with the monkey bars off Funky Monkey. And then because it's angled, the wheel and the drum actually roll backwards and fall back to the next person who starts. So it's a great thought as far as obstacles to have it return to the original person. Yet I think just that little bit of angle they have on the slope for the drum to go up is perfect. And I'll tell you what, if you get the rhythm of it, it's fairly easy to do if you're competent at upper body stuff. But if you can't get the rhythm, man, I've seen guys who are really strong on it really struggle, because it's a timing thing because of the way they have the ring set and how far their rings are set away. And so it was really challenging. I liked it a lot. I thought it was a great obstacle for a Tough Mudder. I don't know, timing wise, I think it's going to take a little longer than Funky Monkey, because it takes a while to progress up with the wheel to the other side, but maybe they'll shorten it a little bit for a regular Tough Mudder or something. But I think it was only I bet it was 10 feet or so, and it probably took, I would say, 3 to 5 minutes to get to the top of it. So it was pretty exhausting. It's a good obstacle, probably one of the best ones they're releasing this year.
There were a couple of different ways people were approaching it. Most people were going forwards, but some people were going sideways, side to side, and some people were even trying to go backwards. Right.
I'll tell you the way I did it, and I'm not really the best at upper body strength stuff. I can hold my own, but I swung side to side. I went forward, and I found that a side to side motion was easier for me to progress through the rings, and I just went one stage at a time. Like I would go to one level and then reach to the next one. But if I kept my body swinging left and right, it kept that free arm able to reach out to the thing. I know what you're talking about. Some of the people had done it backwards, and it almost seemed like they were climbing uphill. I saw a lot of people fail that way, so I don't know the success rate, one compared to the other, but I know it's very doable, but it is definitely a timing thing. You don't want to get in there and try to muscle it. You definitely want to finesse it.
Barrel of fun.
Another one of the new obstacles to Tough Mudder Full this year is T-boned. We saw T-boned last year at Toughest Mudder.
Yeah, no, that one's a great one, and they had that at all the toughest this year. And I think it's just another added step to the Berlin walls where they're not that much taller, but you've got that. And in England, they were I think they were like 12 or 15 inches. They weren't the full 2 foot. But yeah, you've actually got to do a chin up on them, throw your leg up. It's just a cantilevered soffit that sticks out from the front of them. But I don't know, in some ways, it almost frees your leg up to get over it if you use the brace and climb up around it. But I'll tell you what, it's another one of those obstacles that just grab you. If you're ready to cramp even a little bit and you get to that thing, boy, that's a nightmare to do.
An obstacle that no one has seen except for you and a few others at the Innovation Lab is Happy Ending.
Everyone dreams of a happy ending, and yours just might come true. It's big, it's bold. Towering at 25 feet tall, it's the most massive obstacle in the history of the universe. A human pyramid on steroids. And when you finish together.
Happy ending. Yeah, the last thing it should be named, but yeah, you basically crawl up an inverted kind of pyramid scheme with a 2 foot lip at the top. It really surprises me that they added this one in, and I don't know what version they're going to send out, but it was by far the hardest obstacle and the hardest one to complete. It's definitely harder than pyramid scheme because it's got that 2 foot added on the top, and it's kind of a precarious angle straight up at the end, where pyramid scheme, it kind of rolls over at the top. This is more of a vertical, almost like Everest type top to it. And then on the back side of it, there's 2 exits. You can either slide down, which is kind of fun. I mean, that's a good exit for anything. You slide down to the left into just the water, or on the right, you can slide down through electric charged wires, which I did a couple of times, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. Definitely not as hard as just a regular electroshock therapy, because you don't have to put any effort into it. Basically cover your head and just slide down through it, but it'll definitely zap you.
That electrical side, they're calling that one of the fourth new obstacle. They're calling that third rail for Legionnaires.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna get some excitement. It's I would say it's still not even as hard as an electric eel, because again, you just slide through it and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to crawl, and it may give you a pop here or there, but I did not. In the 3 times I went through it, I didn't feel those hard zaps like I do through electroshock therapy or electric eel.
All of those obstacles are for Tough Mudder Full, except for Happy Ending. Happy Ending is for Tough Mudder Full and Tough Mudder Half. They're doing something new this year where instead of having electroshock as the finisher's obstacle, happy ending will be the finisher's obstacle, and electroshock therapy will be just a regular obstacle out on the course. What do you think about that?
Wow. I did not know that. That's interesting. Well, yeah, it's definitely going to cause so instead of like Kong, they're going to have the big group of people going up happy ending at the end then, basically, right?
Yeah, so up to this point, at the end of the course, electroshock therapy is kind of the end for everybody on the full. And then Kong is the finish obstacle for everyone who's a Legionnaire, who's done Tough Mudder before. And Tough Mudder half, people who finish Tough Mudder half, they really just kind of walk through a blow-up arch. There's not really a finisher obstacle. There hasn't been since the very beginning of Tough Mudder half. So what they're doing now is everyone's going to finish Tough Mudder half, Tough Mudder full. They're all going to finish together on happy ending. And then, electroshock's been, it's like a spectator obstacle. People sit in chairs and watch it for like an hour, watch people going through. So it's it's a pretty big change.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll have the same excitement or tense, area, because that's the people, that electroshock therapy at the end is kind of a bread and butter thing for Tough Mudder. Don't you agree?
Oh yeah, it's one of their. So it's a signature thing. Like people like, oh yeah, I do Tough Mudder, except I don't want to be shocked. It's what people think of.
Right.
A lot of people think of when they think of Tough Mudder.
And I've been to a couple of events where they had electroshock therapy out on the course, and back in 2014, they had it at the Poconos, actually out away from the finish line. And it was kind of, it's weird out there with no one around it. It's kind of anticlimactic. It doesn't seem as scary, first of all, without all the people. But yeah, I don't know that. I hope Happy Ending draws the same crowd for them that Electroshock did, because you're right. Will people be throwing their chairs around it and watching it? I guess getting up, it'll be harder. It'll be more demanding, and of course, it'll use all the talents of both half and full people. But I don't know how it's going to. I wonder where they're going to put Clinton. Are they going to put him there, or are they going to put him out on the course somewhere?
You'd think he'd be where the crowd is, which is at the finish line in the village. I don't know.
Right. Well, he's a talented guy. He'll be able to drum up dialogue no matter where he's at. So it'll be fun. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think they're trying to just incorporate, like you said, all finishers into that last obstacle. So
something new Tough Mudder's done this year, and they've never done before, is they are opening up the obstacle vault.
Introducing the vault. For the first time ever, Tough Mudder is unleashing unrivaled obstacles from seasons past, making surprise appearances at events around the world. Experience them before they're gone forever.
We talked about it last year a little bit, that one of the cool things about Toughest Mudder is that Tough Mudder has this big vault of obstacles, and they would every once in a while they would sneak in an old obstacle into Toughest Mudder, and they're actually doing that for everyone this year. Right now they have a list of 25 obstacles online, and you can vote. Anyone can vote on which of those 25 should be added to the course next year. And we'll have a link on our Facebook page, facebook.com/WorldToughestPod, where you can see them. But so, Jim, I've been doing Tough Mudder since 2012, and there are a lot of these obstacles I've never even seen out there. So I wanted to ask you about the 25. We can just kind of talk through them, and at the end, you kind of say which ones are good, which ones aren't so great.
All right.
The 25 obstacles. The first one on the list is Boa Constrictor.
And they've run that's through the tubes, and then sometimes they'll run it down through the barbed wire in the center. They've run that numerous ways. It was in World's Toughest Mudder 1. It was in some of the early Tough Mudders. And I'll tell you what, before they had the ropes in those tubes like they do now, that thing was tough to get out of. You could slide down into it, fun, and then you go through the water and the barbed wire. But getting out of that thing, like I remember the third lap at World's Toughest Mudder, that thing was almost impossible to get out of, because it's really a gut buster, and trying to get out of that tube without any rope. But it's a good obstacle. It's one of their very first obstacles too.
Yeah, especially if you're a bigger guy, it's hard to get through those without the rope.
It is, because you can't bend like everyone else. You have to stay kind of level, so you have to kind of pry yourself out of it. So it's a tough obstacle.
The next obstacle in the vault is Cage Crawl.
I love Cage Crawl. I always have loved Cage Crawl. I have. It kind of freaks people out when they put those little sprays of water in there, which is weird. But again, with a lot of the obstacles, it's how they set it that day, like how deep the water is or how close you are to the fence. Like there's been times when I thought I was going to, drown in some of it. And then there's days when you can just pull yourself through. But I like that obstacle. It's always been fun. And it's usually every time I get in it, it's a cold event, and that water has always been warm. So I've always kind of found it refreshing.
The cage crawl is one of the more claustrophobic obstacles. You're lying on your back in water, and there's a cage, like a chain link fence, maybe 3 inches above the water. So you have to kind of stick your face up to the fence and then pull yourself along. And really, there's no danger, but it feels like, oh man, like, am I going to die?
Right. It feels like you're going to drown, and then spit a little bit of water on you at the end, and you're just like, oh my God, right? I always wear a hat, so I have to turn my hat sideways to get in there, because if I have my hat bill on, then it pushes my face underwater. So that's my litmus test.
That one always stressed me out until one time in Arizona, I was doing the course with my brother, and we went through it, and we were kind of like, oh, that was so. And he's like, do you want to race? I was like, oh man, I don't know. So we went back again, and we like raced through it, and we did it like 2 or 3 times. And since like once you try and do it like as fast as you can, going through it slow is pretty easy.
Right. It does until this, and I'll tell you what, I've been in the same thing that you're saying, because when Ryan Atkins did his very first Tough Mudder, he did it in Colorado on my 100th, and we raced through it. It was his second time through, and we raced through it, and my hat bill got stuck on the side of that thing, and I'll tell you what, you instantly think the same thing. No matter how good stuff's going that day, you're like, I'm going to drown, and it just happens that fast. That's how crazy it is. So, yeah, it still can catch you off guard.
The next obstacle is a controversial one. It's called Crybaby.
And I think, again, it's how the course marshal or how the stewards are setting it, because I've been in that thing where you can barely make it through, and then I've been through it where, you just scream right through it, and you can look in and take pictures. I mean, I have pictures in it with my friends and everything else, and then there's times when you could barely get through it, where you're just coughing and spewing when you get out to the other side. I like it. I think it's another one of the tough mental obstacles for everybody, but I think they really got to, if they're going to use it this year or whenever, they really have to be careful that they monitor that smoke going through there, because it's not going to kill anybody. But I got to tell you, there's times when I've gotten out of it, like it's stupidity to go in it, because it's just so thick with that fog or that mint, whatever they pump in there.
Yeah, Crybaby is their tear gas obstacle. They only did it for 1 year. I think it was 2015. I did it twice, and I had totally different experiences both times. First time I went through it, it was kind of like a deep menthol smell, and you get out and you're like, oh, that was kind of refreshing.
Right, exactly.
But the second time I did it, it was later that year, and I don't know if they just had it turned up different or, but when I felt like I was dying inside, I got out, I almost threw up. I just sat on the ground for like 10 minutes trying to catch my breath. I felt like I couldn't take a deep breath into my lungs. It's you're basically crawling through crawling through a shallow tent basically, and they're pumping gas in. And here's what got me was like when I walked up to the obstacle, all the volunteers were wearing these like level 2 hazmat suits, and they had like biohazard signs, and I'm 90% sure they didn't need any of that, but man, it gets in your head.
Right. It does. And I'll tell you again, they have little pop-out holes where I've seen them pull people out or try to vent it a little bit. But all they have to do is throw like a board you have to cross over or a bale of hay or something, and you get disoriented in there. And that's what I've seen. I've seen people actually lose their shit in there and just, pop out the side and just freak out and lift the whole thing up, because it is. When you get this in there and you're disoriented and there's so much of that menthol smoke, it is very scary.
Next obstacle in the vault is called Dingleberries. It's a cargo net that you have to traverse along the underside of over water.
That one it was set up on Kong when I did it. I've only done it once, but it seemed like I thought it was going to come back. I thought it was a pretty popular one, but it must have been harder than Funky Monkey. That's maybe why it didn't come back. But I thought it was fun and unique. And like I said, as many as I've done, I've only done that obstacle one time.
Next obstacle is Dirty Ballerina. Channel your inner dirty dancer and keep your toes pointed as you hop, jump, and skip over these 4-foot wide ditches filled with some grade A filth.
I've seen that dry. I've seen them put it where you can jump over them. I've seen them where they make them too far to jump over them. I think why they got rid of them is because they stopped filling them with water and they were just dry, and people just got kind of bored of them. I hope those don't. I personally hope those don't come back, because those things, jumping over those long ditches like that, it plays hell on my hip personally. But it's good when they're filled with water. But like I said, at the end when they were doing it, they were just digging them with a backhoe and leaving them dry. And I don't think there's much challenge in that personally.
Next obstacle is Dong Dangler. Channel your inner sloth and shimmy upside down along a rope. It looks like a Tyrolean traverse.
Yeah, they had that in World Toughest Mudder 2011. That's actually a good obstacle. They had it was a cable that had a plastic shroud over it. And I think it's a good athletic obstacle. They typically have it over water, though I did do it one time over hay. And it was fun. I like it. I think it's a good twist to like Funky Monkey or something else. They could easily replace it and just run the cable across Funky Monkey and keep it over water. I like it personally as an obstacle.
Next obstacle is the worst obstacle Tough Mudder has ever had, called Electric Eel. Why just crawl 40 feet under barbed wire when you can get shocked as well?
Barbed wire, are you sure? You want to read that again?
Well, I've only done it 3 or 4 times, but it was crawling under barbed wire. The time I did it, it was crawling under barbed wire, but hanging from that barbed wire was the electrical wires. So it was like... Are you talking about rock shock? Is that what you're talking about? No, that's coming up in a minute. Now you know how you've said a few times how they have different ways of doing it. Last year, they kind of brought back electric eel at a few events, and they kind of changed it where it wasn't the crawling one that it was back in 2012, 2013. It was more of a slip and slide almost, where you're in water but you're crawling through water on plastic with wires hanging down, shocking you. So that's how Electric Eel was. They debuted it, World's Toughest Mudder 2011, and they had a little box there to the side, and you had to wait 10 minutes if you didn't do the obstacle. And a lot of us were doing the obstacle because it was so freaking cold outside. But yeah, it feels like a little tiny sledgehammer hits you in the head with those electric things. But the secret to going through Electric Eel, and I'll just tell everyone, is as you go through it, if your forearms blow water up, what that does is it grounds out all the electricity in front of you, to the point where in 2013 at World's Toughest Mudder, they had this trendy little thing, like they were giving you a quiz at the beginning of Electric Eel, like there was an A side and a B side, and if you answered right, you would just get a free pass, basically. Right. And each time the guy would ask me the question, and I wouldn't even talk to him. I just keep walking to the left, and I go, no, I got this whole thing figured out. Like, I just dive in there, and as I sweep forward, I brush my arms, and my forearms throw water up, and what it does is it takes the electricity out of the wires in front of you. So there's the secret to Electric Eel for everyone. I hope they don't bring Electric Eel back. I love Electric Eel, I got to tell you. I like it better than electroshock therapy because it's easier to get through. That's a very low bar, John. That's a very low bar. I need a little something to create shock in my life. Oh my God. Next obstacle is Greased Lightning. It looks like basically a water slide. Yeah, they would just find the pit on wherever the property was and just drop big rolls of 100-foot plastic and fill the center with water. And it was just basically an easy obstacle to slide into, but the other side was the same, so it was kind of hard getting out of that plastic off the other backside of it. So, but it was fun. Who doesn't like sliding down at one of the innovation labs? And I think it was 2014 at that lake. What is that lake in California? You know it, where they used to have the Tough Mudders. In Temecula? Temecula. In Temecula, they had this huge slide, and it had like a little jump at the bottom, and we got to do it in the Obstacle Innovation Lab. It was like, I'm not joking, it was 100 feet long,
And we just kept crawling up and doing it again. It just, who doesn't like to just slide down a hill like a slip and slide? That's basically what it was. So I think it's fun just to get everybody charged up.
Next obstacle is Gut Buster. Gut Buster, I've only seen once at World's Toughest in 2015. You have your feet.
Oh, I know.
Your body's basically horizontal. Your feet are on a piece of plywood, and your arms are on these poles that are suspended about 3 feet apart. And so it's a real core exercise.
It is. Gut Buster is a good one. And they actually have a friend, or my friend John is in that picture that they're promoting it with, and it is at World's Toughest Mudder. I think it's a good core obstacle, and I think it would be great if they brought it back to every Tough Mudder. I think it's a great obstacle. It could be a trademark one for Tough Mudder also.
Jim, tell me about the next obstacle, hot shots.
Hot shot is what Tough Mudder does when they think you're bored of Arctic enema. They did. And I only did it, I think, twice in all my time doing Arctic enema. But they literally had a shot of hot sauce that you would take before you jumped into Arctic enema. Like, the Arctic enema wasn't hot enough that they wanted your mouth to be burning as you went in to maybe forget about the ice you were going to get shoved up inside your shirt or whatever. And like I said, at one point when we did it the second time one day, the hot shots were so watered down, they were like tomato juice or something. But I remember going first wave in the morning, and the stuff was pure like Tabasco sauce or something. It was crazy. But you take a quick shot of it, run up, and then you shoot down into Arctic enema. That's what the obstacle is.
The next obstacle is human gecko. It looks like a kind of like a
wall.
Yeah, a wall you climb across, like it's almost like a Z-wall Spartan.
Yeah, it's kind of our version of the little 2x4 blocks with their floating walls that they do. And again, I'd done that one, and I think isn't just a tip, or what do they call the other one where you go across the bar? Those two kind of came out at the same time. There were two versions of the same obstacle, and it's fun. But I actually, between that one and the other one where they just have the 2x4 screwed on top, I actually like the one with the 2x4 screwed on top better. The blocks are okay, but the other one, literally, you just have to hang, and it's all upper body strength. There's no leg strength involved in it.
Next obstacle is hump chuck.
Hump chuck is a World's Toughest Mudder obstacle that I think would be cool if it was applicable in a regular Tough Mudder where you're just kind of coming out of a swim across a lake or a walk across a lake, because it definitely is good for teamwork and camaraderie. And it's tough at World's Toughest Mudder, but on a warm day crossing a lake or something, I think it'd be fun. And it's a funner version of, I think, a pyramid scheme, because you're coming out of the water, you're all clean, you're not muddy, and it does take a couple people to get you up there and a little upper body strength to get up there.
It's like a really short pyramid scheme coming out of a lake.
Right, just above, you can jump. It's a 2x4 connected on the bottom of a slide wall. And if you can jump high enough, you can grab the upper 2x4 and pull yourself up. But after a couple laps at World's Toughest Mudder, it takes a team effort to get up there.
Next obstacle is island hopping.
Oh, I love island hopping. Again, it premiered 2011 World's Toughest Mudder. And the way they used to make it, I liked it better. They were plywood platforms that were like 4x4. And I think they were like 4 feet apart. And they were tied together, and they floated a lot better. You jumped from pod to pod, and if you had decent balance, you could make it across. They later changed it to a black plastic one, and at one of the events, even in World's Toughest Mudder, they had like these floaty things, these like cheap plastic round floaty things. I think if they bring it back, and they bring it back more with the plywood and the styrofoam inside, where they actually hold up better, because that plywood, even when it gets wet, there's traction to it. But some of those black things, the black islands they've used over in like the UK and stuff that I've jumped on, they're a little slicker. But I like it as an obstacle, but I've noticed that since they brought it back before, or when they brought it back before in the past, that the island pods didn't have enough flotation in them. So I hope they beef those up a little bit. I know the first time I did it was in 2011, and it was an awesome, fun obstacle.
Next obstacle we mentioned a minute ago, just the tip.
Now, just the tip is the other one I was talking about, right? Where there's a 2x4 screwed in at the top.
Yeah, it's a lot of hanging. It's kind of like the similar to the ultimate cliffhanger on Ninja Warrior. You have to kind of move yourself along using. Now, there's a little bit of foot support once in a while, but it's like probably 90%, upper body.
Yeah, and they change it like where it's in the center. They move it up even like 4 inches, and then it kind of drops down on the other side. Yeah, and it's just basically an upper body one where you use just your arm strength to get across. So you can use your feet a little bit, but it definitely weighs on the upper body thing. And then you can do either side. So it moves people through fairly quickly. I think it's another good obstacle. Saw it early on in like 12 in one of the Colorado events, and saw it in Arizona a couple of times. But it's a good obstacle, good upper body obstacle.
Next obstacle is King of the Mountain. Sometimes they call it bail bonds.
The big hay bales, where they back east. I've only seen it back there where they get those big rolls of hay and just stack them like 3 high. It's like 24 feet high. It's a fun one. It's you can see it for a ways. It's kind of nice to look across the course. When you can't really tell where obstacles are, you can look across and see that thing on a hilltop. Usually, it kind of gives the same feel as like ladder to hell. Get to the top of it, you can see it around. It's fun. It's fun and easy to do. Probably a crowd favorite. I guess you'd have to be around somewhere where they had hay, though. That's the only drawback.
It's probably the best smelling obstacle.
It helps you get clean. That hay stuff really gets the mud off you too.
Next obstacle is Leap of Faith. Jim, tell me about Leap of Faith.
Leap of Faith is my all-time Tough Mudder favorite obstacle. Absolutely. 100%. There's no second. You run off a platform, which used to be, what did they call it before we just jumped in the water? What did they call it?
Walk the plank?
Walk the plank. Where you used to walk, it was like 12 feet in the air. You ran off at Leap of Faith. They actually gave you a plank to run off of. They put like a wire mesh on it so you wouldn't slip and fall. And then you jumped over to an angled net that had 4-inch mats on it. And where people got in trouble with it is if they didn't make it to the net, they would get caught like at the waist and then just bounce they rotated around the end of it. They hit their guts, they hit their arm. I've seen people land on other people jumping across there. A lot of people said it's dangerous, but if you do it correctly and run and just kind of fall to one side or the other and land on the mats, I actually ran and would spin in the air and land on my back and never had a problem with it. But, I know one of my friends who broke his finger on it. Somebody else broke their arm on it. But I can tell you this, it is a little bit scary, but it's absolutely my favorite all-time any Tough Mudder obstacle.
That is Leap of Faith, Jim Lowe's.
Leap, love it.
Next obstacle is log jamming.
Again, an early obstacle that they used to use a lot of. It was in World's Toughest Mudder 2011. I think they actually quit setting it up because it's a lot of work. Unless they can leave it there on a course that they use year after year. I mean, there's a lot of effort put into it. I look at a lot of these from construction standpoint because I build things, and I'm thinking it took a long time to set these logs up, and then you got to take them all down and set them somewhere else. And it was hard. Like they would just have the arrows. You'd have to go up, down, up, down. And when you're tired, man, dropping down on your knees and crawling through if it's dirty or wet or whatever else, and it wears on you. It would be a good toughest obstacle. I think that would be a good toughest obstacle.
It's basically going over and under logs for about 40 feet.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, they can make it as hard as possible. They can make you crawl through logs. It's just how they set the arrows. So they could make it difficult or they could make it super easy.
Another obstacle from Toughest Mudder is lumberjacked.
That's just jumping over the single log, correct?
Yeah, it's like a chest high log. You and I went over this a couple times together in Whistler.
We did. We have a picture of that actually. But yeah, it takes a little bit of help to get over it. And when you're tired, jumping up that 5 feet, springing off your legs to get over that thing, And then if you don't have the right clothes on, it'll tear skin and everything else, depending on how much bark is there. I think it's an obstacle that's okay, but there's not a lot of thought in it. I think it's maybe okay for an 8-hour obstacle, but if I personally saw that on a Tough Mudder course, I would think, you may as well just dig a ditch, to me, like to set a log across and just have to jump. So not one of my favorites.
Next obstacle is Massive Turd. It's a cargo net.
Go ahead. Yeah, the only time I saw it, it was on top of 3 storage bins, like those seaworthy ones, those big metal bins.
Sure.
And 3 high, and it's pretty intimidating when you get up there. Of course, you're not going to fall through the net, but yeah, being 30 feet in the air over hard ground, you tend to, I didn't see too many people running across that thing. They would dive into it and just roll sideways. And it is after, again, it was a world's toughest mudder obstacle. After doing stuff all day long to jump on that thing, you're like, it kind of makes you think before you jump out in it. But it was a fun one. I think, again, it's just a lot to set up. I think they had like 6 containers there on each side just to set it up, so probably won't see too much of it.
Next obstacle on the list is Operation.
Oh, my second favorite obstacle of all time.
Describe Operation.
You stand in water and you run a long, thin pole with a hook on the end to try to grab a hook or a circle on the other, or a ring on the other wall. And what it is there's a round ring around the hole you're putting it in that's electrified. So if your body's grounded through the pole you're holding to the ring in the hole that you're sticking it through, you'll actually get shocked and drop the pole and drop the ring, and then have to do the penalty loop. And usually the penalty loops are fairly long if you're at the toughest event. But I have to tell you that I don't know that I can say this with too many obstacles. That's the only obstacle that I've never, ever failed, I think, ever.
I used to hate this obstacle until I kind of figured I had to do it in Chicago, and I kind of finally figured it out. But it was like, I just hate it. It's I don't like getting shocked at all. And this one takes a lot of technique. It's not just you can't just brute force it.
Should I give the secret to this obstacle too?
No, I don't think Tough Mudder is going to put this one on a regular course just from like a logistics standpoint. But go ahead. Yeah. Well, how do you do it?
Well, this is how you complete it every time, 100%. You find the left side of the thing where the brace is. You walk up to it. There's a brace on the left side and the right. Find the left side one. You go up. You lean against the brace. You grab the pole. You put your elbow or wrist against the wall itself, and you put your hand right in the center of the hole. So you've got everything braced. With your left hand, you grab the pole, stick it through the electrified hole with the hook on it, or with the little bend on it for the hook. You slide it through with your right hand, just holding your left hand steady right in the center of the hole. You reach the pole out. You get the hook onto the ring. You pull the ring, all while you're just holding in the center of the hole with your braced left hand. You pull the pole back out, you hand the ring, and you walk off.
It sounds so easy, but it's not that easy.
It is that easy. It totally is that easy. I'm just telling you.
The next obstacle.
Never failed it.
The next obstacle is rope-a-dope.
Oh, is that the new one?
This is the new one from World's Toughest to 2017.
I hate this obstacle. Run out. I'm heavy, so try to run out and hang a goat from a wet rope in the middle of the night. That already sounds fun, right? So you climb up this 16-foot rope to this angled rope that you slide down. You know, everybody from climbing halfway up it gets it all wet, so it's really hard to grab. You know, the people that can do this have really great grip strength and just really great core strength. I'm not one of those people. I get wet on this obstacle. I call this obstacle shower. That's what I call it.
Next obstacle is Twinkle Toes.
Twinkle Toes has a bunch of different versions. It depends on if they use microlambs or 2x10s, or they've used tons of different things. They've done different lengths. Sometimes in the middle of it, it's basically a beam pulled over water, or I've seen it pulled over hay too, where they put like blocks in the center. It's 3.5 inches, So you can either walk across it if it gets muddy, it gets a little slick, it kind of moves left and right. Seen some people get really hurt on it at times trying to reach for the beam after they fall off. But the hardest I've ever seen it is you have to climb a couple blocks to the center and then climb back down them while the beam's moving left and right. People usually get in trouble right at the end where they don't quite make it all the way, and they either jump for the landing or jump for another beam, and then they just get, pole line or whatever that's called, clotheslined. They get clotheslined as they jump in by the beam, and it's never pretty. So, but it's a fun obstacle.
It's basically
like
a balance beam. Yeah, it's just a balance beam.
Right, it's a balance beam that flies back and forth because it's about 30 feet across there. That's why it flexes back and forth.
Yeah, kind of. You're walking, you're just trying to balance, and it starts swaying side to side, left to right, and then you get it halfway across, and some guy starts behind you.
Right, or some guy jumps and grabs your beam because he thinks that's going to save him as he falls in the water. Right.
Yeah, the first time I did this obstacle, it was 2012. They had the electric wires run along the sides of the beam to prevent people from trying to sit on the beam and shimmy across.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So,
I didn't know that.
Oh, I've had a Tough Mudder podcast for a year, and I've never told this story. I was going across Twinkle Toes, and I was like 90% of the way there. Some guy gets on behind me, and it starts swaying. And I'm like, I have my arms out. I'm about to fall, right? But I'm like 4 feet from the finish, right? But I'm like, I'm going. I'm going to fall over. I'm going. So I'm about to fall left. I jump off my beam, and I landed on the beam next to me, and I finished the obstacle. It was the highlight of my career 5 years ago. No one saw it. No one will ever believe me. It was amazing.
Oh, my God. That is so dangerous. But you made it, huh?
I made it. The best I've ever done.
That's awesome. That's an awesome feat because that's usually when people get clotheslined and then fall into the water right there. So you did good.
You're getting near the end of the list here. Shocks on the rocks.
That is terrible. I've only seen that at World's Toughest Mudder 12, I think. And basically, you don't really get shocked a lot. It's more of a mental thing. But you're crawling through literally boulders, and the electricity is hanging down, and it really has nothing to ground to. So unless you're super wet, you don't get shocked, but your wetsuit gets torn and your knees get trashed and your elbows. So hope it never makes its face again.
2 more obstacles. Trench warfare.
Trench warfare. I've seen it a couple different ways. I've seen it through dry. I've seen it in Colorado. I saw they dug it through snow and put plastic over. Basically, these tunnels they dig, and then they drape plastic or cardboard or something over it and then throw hay over it. They're kind of dark inside, and they zigzag from left to right and left to right. I can tell you at World's Toughest Mudder 2011, I sat in them at night just to stay warm. There was water in the bottom, and it wasn't froze, and it just felt nice out of the cold. So they're fun, and I think a lot of people haven't seen them, but they're kind of a claustrophobic one. But you just kind of go through these dark, dug tunnels from a backhoe, and they lay plastic or plywood or something over them, and they're probably 30 feet long, and I think they're good. They're a good obstacle, better than digging a ditch. I can tell you that.
If you're not claustrophobic, they're kind of fun. You're like scampering through like a gopher or something.
No, they are fun, I think, and like I said, the ones in the snow are kind of cold because they just had plastic and stuff over them, so they're a little chilly going through there on your shorts, but yeah, the dirt ones, they're good. And where I went through them the first time at World's Toughest Mudder, they were awesome because they were warm at night. So,
last obstacle on the list is underwater tunnels.
Underwater tunnels, one of the killers from World's Toughest Mudder, where you have to submerge yourself all the way, and on a nice day, that's a super fun obstacle to do, but on a cold day, like who wants to submerge their head and get water in their ears and everything else? It's basically 3 barrels set out in water where you have to come up to them and you can't go around them or anything else. You have to submerge yourself. The first time I did it was in Colorado, and we did it on a beaver pond at like 11,000 feet. There was only 2 of them, and I can tell you half the people walked around them, and half the people that went through left with hypothermia and a space blanket. I mean, it was that cold. They just broke the ice in June. They just broke the ice off the beaver pond, and that water was just deathly cold. So the first time I did it, I hated it. And but I've done it sometimes in Texas and other places, and it's really fun in a warm Tough Mudder.
You know, I would say this isn't something that would translate well from World's Toughest to a regular Tough Mudder, except it was at my very first Tough Mudder in Temecula, like we were talking about. So they might bring it back.
Yeah. No, I think they would. It's fun. I've seen it in Colorado a couple of times, and it's not super cold outside. It really is a fun obstacle, but like that's the one thing. Like no one wants to submerge their head, right? Like that gets your ears cold and your hair cold and everything else. It's one thing falling in, with Funky Monkey or something and getting your chest wet or whatever, but on a cold day, getting your hair wet and getting water in your ears and stuff, it can be a long day after that.
And it's not just like going underwater. It's like you have to go underwater, travel 4 feet underwater, and then pop up on the other side. So it's
yeah. And it's long enough. Those barrels are big enough where if you don't get all the way under them, again, it's kind of a claustrophobic feeling coming up and having your head hit them as you're coming. So it's definitely a tactical one. You got to get some speed to get under them. But yeah, it's definitely a cold day bad, warm day great.
So you mentioned you love Leap of Faith. What are your other 2 or 3 favorites on the list here?
Operation. And I think of the new ones, definitely the new, the very first one. What was it? What was the name of it?
The very first one on the list?
Kong.
Oh, of the new ones, Kong Infinity?
2.0. Kong Infinity, probably one of the best obstacles they've ever designed. I got to tell you, it's not only an upper body one, but it's a fun upper body one with some kind of challenge to it, right? It's not just manhandling the bars. Like you have to have rhythm and you have to be able to get through it. So I think those 3, Kong Infinity, Leap of Faith, and Operation, my 3 favorite obstacles of all time.
Fun fact about Kong Infinity, it was designed by a Tough Mudder Legionnaire, just a regular guy that likes Tough Mudders and entered a contest, and he won.
Wow, yeah, super good obstacle for sure.
Well, Jim, what are your plans for 2018? I know you did all 6 Toughest Mudders last year. They're going to have 8 this year, 4 of them over in Europe, or internationally, I guess. There's one in Australia also.
Right.
What are you doing for 2018?
I think my Tough Mudders basically this year are going to just kind of circle around those 8 events. I'm going to try to hit all 8 of them. I've never been to Australia. I've been to Germany before, so I'm going to hit that. I've been to Scotland 3 or 4 times, and then, of course, the one in Nottingham that was there next year. The tough thing about this year is those 3 events that I said, Australia, England, and Germany are all a week apart.
Back to back to back.
So that's going to be interesting, on the body and also travel-wise. Like it's going to be interesting. I've never been to Australia, so I guess if I make it and make it back, it'll happen. But that'll be the toughest one to do because of the timing and where it's set between other events. Like it's basically going to just be a long weekend in Australia. How about that?
I don't know if you remember, but you told me something very similar at the start of 2017. I'm just going to do these 6 toughest events, and then you went out and did like 30 Tough Mudders.
Yeah, I did 36. So yeah, but I started doing those toughest ones at the end because they were accumulating those. So I don't know how that's going to play into it. Right? They're going to make that. They're going to make that whole series with all 3. They're going to make that an actual thing. I know they're going to pay out first place, but kind of the rankings of the crown for that.
Oh, the Holy Grail mileage.
The Holy Grail, yeah. So the Holy Grail mileage. I think it's going to be a little bit bigger deal this year with everybody.
So last year was kind of an unofficial thing. They had it listed, but no one knew there was a prize. And 3 guys, Ryan Atkins, Mark James, and Tyler Nash, were all kind of I don't know if Ryan was really going for it, but Ryan ended up winning it.
Right.
And, I mean, it's hard to do 110 miles at World's Toughest and not win that, but
it really is. Even when you only did like what 2. What did he do? He only did 4 of the toughest.
He did right? 3 of the toughest. No, he did 4 of the toughest.
3 of the toughest.
No, Lindsay did 3.
Yeah.
Ryan did 4. He did 2 toughers,
right.
and he did world's toughest. But 110 miles kind of covers up for not doing as many toughers as everybody else.
Right. And then what was funny is me and Mark James were up there, but it shows like the hours you run to get those miles. Mark and I were at like the 60 hours thing, and Ryan and everybody else were like at the 30-hour thing. So it kind of it's fun. I think they'll do something. I think they'll just pay out probably the first again this year. But it's kind of cool to be on that because, it'll get people to go out to those events and do different things because I think that was real popular last year. I know they deleted the Whistler one because it wasn't real popular. But I got to tell you, you were at the Whistler one with me too, and I think. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it was one of the more fun ones, the Whistler one.
That Whistler, that's one of the funnest Tough Mudder events I've ever been to, like ever. That 8-hour toughest Whistler. So, yeah, I'm really disappointed they're not bringing Whistler back.
No, and they're not doing it because there was only, 200 and some people there?
Yeah, it was the smallest of all 6 of the toughest.
Right. But I got to tell you, I did all of them, and I think I ranked it as the hardest, first of all, but you're right, it was fun and it's unique, and I think that's what Tough Mudder's going to have to continue to do. I know they can't get everybody up there like the Philadelphia one, but, I mean, these people are going to have to do destination ones. Like you should, if a person, I would rather see somebody or myself, I would rather go to the one in Germany than 2 here in the United States, because that's what's cool about this. When you start going around the world and start seeing all these other people that are involved in Tough Mudder and what they think and how they react even as Americans. I mean, it's great. It's great to just share your story over there and share your, heritage and being American and watching with that was one of the funnest things. I couldn't speak to anyone in the German one I went to. Some of them spoke English, but it was just fun being there. We still got the gist of it. We still had a good time. What's great about that is we get out of our little comfort zone, right? Like we go to those other places and we're not in our little cliques like we are over here. And it's fun to just get out and just be a normal person at those events. That's what I enjoy about all of them now. Starting in the back of the first pack instead of the front and just being out there with people that don't know who you are because we're not anyone anyway. We're just Tough Mudders. We're just somebody who enjoys the event. So go out there and meet new people and bring more people to it. All of us could be ambassadors. All of us could bring new people in. And that's what it's about, just keeping it active and keeping it new and fresh. There's still a ton of people that I talk to that have never done Tough Mudder. And once they get involved and do 1 or 2, they're like, yeah, I'm going to do another one. But those toughest events and stuff, I got to tell you, a lot of people that talk about being ultra athletes and stuff, they don't mess with those things. They're scary to them. Like they don't want to be out at night. They don't want to be in a wetsuit. So what all of us do are still kind of cool, even in the whole industry of ultras. Like I think it's going to become bigger and bigger. I think that's where Tough Mudder is going to draw people on more of the competitive level on these toughest events. I think that's where you're going to see the biggest surge. I think you're going to start seeing those events where they're all like Philadelphia, where they're all like 1,000 people, because I think it's a cool event and it's hard enough to draw. They have the same draw as World's Toughest Mudder, but it's also 8 hours, so people think they can do it. I think this year we're going to see the toughest series just explode.
I hope so. I think it's the best thing Tough Mudder's done since they started. It's great.
And for us, all loyal people, I hope they bring Whistler back next year. How about that? Because I want another picture with a bear beside me on the road. Like, who doesn't love that picture?
Jim Campbell.
All right. Well, thanks, Lou. That's it. Thanks for doing such a great job on this stuff and keeping the community aware of all this stuff. Sorry I didn't have any, Ryan Wood moments, but I'll try later.
Jim Campbell, thanks much.
Have a good night.
Special thanks to Jim DeGoat Campbell for appearing in this episode. Well done, Jim. You can find him on Facebook as Campbell Jim or on Instagram at Goat Tough. This is the first of 5 episodes this week. That's more than a month's worth of episodes crammed into less than a week. How cool is that? Leave us a review on iTunes and put your 2018 goals in there. How many miles are you going to get at World's Toughest Mudder? Let us know. I will read it in a future episode. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Go spend time with someone you love.